One of my favorite conversations that I get to have at work, which is a pretty common conversation, is when somebody's having a debate with themselves about whether they should keep their existing bike that they already have and continue to invest in that bike, or if they should trade up to something more modern. Now, this can be a very complex topic because there are so many variables, and most people don't have the exact same model that they're coming off of and going on to. A lot of people won't have the exact same use case as well. So there's really no cookie cutter answer for, oh, you have this bike and you're considering getting this bike, you should absolutely upgrade. And it's the same for everyone that has that bike and is looking at that bike. It's usually a lot more personalized than that. So most people are like me and they have such a reverence for the older style bikes. Like, the people that are on hardtail, knuckle chops, panhead, shovelhead choppers and things like that. Even Evo chops are beautiful. And there's a lot of people like myself who are in the FXR world and love FXRs. And, one of my favorite style bikes is a club style dyno. Like a properly done club style dyno is one of my favorite aesthetically pleasing bikes. I think one of the big variables is the age of the bike that you're thinking about moving on from. Because depending on the age of your bike, parts availability can start to play a large factor. And people who are still working on that bike, or maybe it's you working on that bike. And I think if it's basic maintenance, basic upkeep, you're not doing any crazy stuff to your bike where you're tearing it down and it's a week-long job for you to do, which is something you wouldn't expect to have to do on a more modern bike, right? So if we're taking that equivalency there, that we have, a similar reliability and a similar interval of services and maintenance required for the bike. The biggest difference between an older bike and a newer bike can be parts availability. And another very subjective part is technology improving. So transmissions, getting a sixth gear, getting EFI versus having a carbureted bike, depending on where you live, if you worry about cold starts, if you're dailying the bike. So you can kind of see how use case and personal subjectivity can kind of play a very big role in this. But it's one of my favorite topics to talk about because I think we all have a lot of data because most of us are watching a lot of these model reviews and have been throughout the years. And even the guys that are riding older vintage bikes, and we see videos of that and learning about older models that were before my time, before your time. If you're obsessed about this stuff like I am, you've probably watched a lot of those videos as well. I think most of us have an inner dichotomy with this kind of thing, is where even me on a 23 Road Glide ST, now things have changed. There's a different electrical architecture in the baggers now. They've gotten a little bit lighter. They have water-cooled heads. There are some things about the newest bikes that I like a little bit better than I like my bike. And then you start talking about the financial side, the investment side. It's like, okay, well, starting over on a new build or buying a bike and having to start from scratch with all of your modifications, your ergonomics changes, your windshield, your bars, your mufflers, your seat, all that kind of stuff can kind of feel like a big mountain to climb when, especially if you already have all that custom work done on your existing bike. Now, anyone that has any reason to upgrade, I don't think one reason is lesser than another reason. For some people, they just like new stuff. And we get a lot of people that come into the shop just because they want to look at the new shiny stuff that's come out. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like if you want to buy a new bike, then by all means, go buy a new bike. But typically this conversation happens when someone has a bike that is paid off. And for most people, it takes a few years to get your bike paid off. And in that time, you're customizing it, you're making it your own, and you're really falling in love with your bike and tailoring that bike to your own riding style and what you like to have on your bike. Now, you take all that aftermarket stuff and you look at all the money you've invested, and then it can feel very difficult to start over on a new bike and have to restart that process all over again. Unless you're made of money and you can have it done on day one, then kudos to you. But I see this a lot in the comments on videos on YouTube whenever someone's talking about a new bike and maybe giving it a comparison to how the bike has changed throughout the years. And then, you'll always have somebody that has a certain year and will defend their year, which I find to be a very interesting thing. And no shade to those people. If you defend what you have and you like what you have, then that, I think, that's a good thing that you like what you have. But I think that where we are with social media influence, and it's very hard to argue that if you're on social media platforms, that you are not influenced by what you see on the social media platforms. And this is kind of how we keep our knowledge base relevant and we know what's going on in the community. But if you're anything like me, you will have this inner turmoil where it's like, man, I kind of do like certain things about this, and is it worth it? Is it financially responsible, or is it worth my time and effort to start over and trade up to a new bike? And what I've learned over the last few years of working in this industry and talking to countless people about different stories and countless different experiences is that so many people can have such a different experience than you and have such a different perspective than you. And so the subjectivity that has to be taken into account when having a conversation like this is so much about what we talk about on Matt's channel, which is everything is about use case. The value proposition is a very unique and subjective thing. There have been times when I've had conversations in the comments where, well, I don't see any value in that feature. But we kind of see this trend happen over and over again where things will change and people want to defend what they've already invested their money in, and so they don't like the change. I've seen, read, heard all the negative comments about the furniture changes on the Street Glide and the Road Glide. I just had a good friend of mine, John, message me a screenshot of the Street Glide fairing and saying, like, this bike is so ugly. And it's just his personal opinion. He doesn't like the way the new Street Glide fairing looks, and that's okay. And if you only listen to the loudest people who are being vocal about the things they don't like, you'd probably think that, hey, man, these 24 fairings are just not going to sell. And quite contrary to that, more people were looking for the 24s than they were for the last of the 23s, at least in my demographic. And sometimes this change is a little bit slow. I think it was a little bit slower in 2018 on the Softails when the redesign happened there and the dyno was discontinued. It took a little bit longer for the people who really liked the dyno chassis, the dyno platform, the twin cam motor to transition over to appreciating what the M8 had to offer with the new lowrider style model. And I don't know if there's any metric for this, but I don't know how many of those people are still committed to staying on the dyno chassis and how many of those people have converted over, or not necessarily converted over, but given the Softail chassis a chance to potentially appreciate what it may offer. And that's kind of where I always try to lead the conversation, is that data is such an important thing. It's good to have all this data. It's good to understand people's different perspectives because everyone is going to have a unique experience. And if you can learn something from that experience and you can apply it to yourself so that you can make a more informed decision, that's a good thing. But I think at the end of the day, what really matters is the butt dyno. And if you don't ride a bike, it's very difficult to have an informed opinion on the bike. So I had this conversation in the chat in YouTube on one of Matt's videos where we were talking about a specific bike, and a gentleman was very strongly suggesting that his bike was better and that the new model had nothing better to offer it. And so we kind of responding back to each other, and we're talking about a few different things. And he's just locked in on this, like, what I have is better. And then after a while, I kind of get to the point where I'm like, well, what did you think of the new bike? And then come to find out that he hasn't even ridden it yet. So I kind of suggested to him that, like, hey, imagine if we were talking about hamburgers and you're like, no, the burger joint next to my house is the best burger ever. And I'm like, cool, I'm just telling you about this burger, and this burger is pretty cool. Here's what's on it, and here's the kind of sauce it has, and here are the toppings. And no, the burger at the corner store is better. And then I kind of get to a point where I'm like, well, have you tried this other burger? It would be very difficult to make a comparison between two burgers if you've only tried one of the burgers. But the point of the analogy is that data really matters. And I think the best way to figure out if you want to make this type of change and you're on the fence about, should I keep investing in my older bike or should I move forward and upgrade to a newer bike? The biggest thing is how you vibe with that bike, and really riding it is the only way to know. And the same would be for food. You can read the reviews on a restaurant, and you can see what their Google reviews and their Yelp reviews are, but you really don't know until you try it. So if you watch my channel or any of my videos for any length of time, you know that I always talk about spectrum. Everything is on a spectrum, and not all differences are equal. So you can look at the differences of the rake, trail, and wheelbase of all the Softail models, and most of them are slightly different, but how much of a difference does that actually make when you're comparing the two models? And that really depends on who you talk to. Some people will say that the Heritage and the Street Bob are completely different bikes, when it's really just mostly where your feet are, because while they're stylistically different, yes, they have a very similar stance and wheelbase and rake and trail, but it doesn't matter if the bikes feel different to you. And this is where the spectrum really comes into play, because just because I say, hey, they both have a 30-degree rake, but when you ride these two bikes, you hate one and you love the other, then that experience really matters. And until you start riding these bikes and you start putting serious miles on these bikes, it can be very difficult to know how you're going to feel about it long term. Like, you can't really know until you know. Another thing I'm always advocating for is for people to ride more and rent bikes and try different bikes, or ride your friends' bikes, or go to demo days and stuff like that, because the more data you have, the better position you'll be in to make a responsible decision when you're looking to invest in a new bike. So slightly counterintuitive maybe for somebody who sells Harley Davidsons for a living, but I'm at home in my garage. I sell bikes at work. I don't really need to be selling bikes on YouTube. But for me, as a work experience, what's most rewarding is when you see the enthusiasm and the excitement for someone when they ride a bike and it just clicks with them and their eyes light up and this is the bike. I think I've seen that enough times that it almost sets the bar, is that's what I want for my customers. And that's what I want for anyone who's buying a bike, is that it is a wow factor. This is something that, feeds your soul and fulfills an important part of your life. So for me, that inner turmoil is kind of like keeping up with the Joneses, looking at the things on social media and being like, man, that's beautiful. That's dope. I like that. I wish I could do that. And then reeling myself back in and being like, yeah, that's not really in my price range, or it's not a priority for me, or that doesn't really fit my use case. Like, yeah, it looks cool and I would love to have it, but it doesn't really fit what I'm trying to do with my bike. So I think most of us are having that push and pull scenario inside of us at all times. And sometimes it's nice to talk with another enthusiast about those things. And I find I have this conversation quite a bit with people at work. And I can't really say I don't really do like a psychological evaluation of, would this guy have upgraded his bike either way? Was he already ready? Or there's just way too many variables to say with any absolute certainty that yes, no matter what you have, no matter who you are, no matter what kind of riding you do, you should always upgrade your bike as soon as you possibly can. And the inverse is true too. That I don't think there's an absolute scenario where you should never upgrade your bike, or never get something different, or never try something new. I think for me in this industry, what I'd really like to do, what the dream is to have a bunch of cool old vintage bikes. Like, I would love to have a rigid chopper Harley. I have my FXR. I would love to get a club style Dyna. I would love to have a skinny tire bagger again, and have a stable of really cool bikes, and then one main touring bike that I'm always upgrading, or not always upgrading, but continuously upgrading. I work in this industry, and touring is the kind of riding that I like to do. I'd like to have a modern bike that's relevant to what my customers are looking at and what my customers are currently buying, and also being knowledgeable on what's current and what's new. I think it's important for me to have a lot of seat time on these modern bikes so that I'm coming from a place of experience and not from a place of conjecture. But most of my return viewers, you guys have told me what you ride, and some of you guys have older bikes, like 07s and things like that, and you're completely happy with them and you don't see a need to upgrade. And other people are more like me, where the modern bike, they want to upgrade it every 2 to 3 years, just because that's where their preference lies, and that's kind of how they're an enthusiast for this motorcycling hobby. I don't think there's a wrong answer. I don't think there's a right answer. Usually my main focus when someone brings this up is that I'm trying to provide as much data as I can so that they can make the most informed decision that they can. And I think the best data that you can collect is riding the bike. But you guys let me know. Are you keeping your bike forever? Are you going to upgrade as soon as you can? Or do you regularly upgrade? I love to chat with you guys in the comments, and I really appreciate you guys watching. If you made it this far, thank you very much. And we will see you on the next one, guys.